The auction room, nestled in the subterranean chambers of the shadow market, reeked of desperation and stale blood. Flickering torches cast elongated shadows across stone walls centuries old, their amber light illuminating faces both human and inhuman. Creatures of darkness mingled in hushed conversations, their eyes occasionally darting toward the wooden stage where merchandise would soon be displayed. Among them stood Lysander, tall and imposing, his pale skin almost luminous against his black velvet attire. He remained motionless, a statue amid the shifting crowd, drawing nervous glances from those who recognized the silver emblem fastened at his throat. A twisted serpent devouring its tail, the mark of the royal vampire bloodline. Few dared approach him, and those who did maintained a respectful distance, their bodies instinctively bowing despite themselves. 500 years of existence had made Lysander weary of these gatherings, yet tonight's auction held a specific purpose. The Blood Moon Festival approached, and tradition demanded the king partake in the ancient rite, one night with a mortal servant, one night of controlled bloodletting to honor the origins of his kind. A tiresome ritual, but one he could not ignore without risking dissent among the elder covens. "Your Majesty honors us with his presence," came a sibilant voice beside him. The auctioneer, a half-demon with scales shimmering beneath his human disguise, offered a deep bow. "We have exceptional merchandise tonight. Perhaps something specific you seek." Lysander's gaze remained fixed on the empty stage. "Someone untouched by our kind, someone who will survive the night." The auctioneer's smile tightened. "Of course, sire. The merchandise is inspected thoroughly before presentation. Only the finest quality for your consideration." A bell tolled somewhere in the depths of the market, signaling the auction's commencement. Lysander took his designated place in the front row, upon a chair draped in crimson velvet, a throne of sorts, hastily arranged when word of his attendance spread. He ignored the murmurs rippling through the crowd, the mixture of awe and fear his presence commanded. One by one, humans were paraded across the stage, some drugged into compliance, others wide-eyed with terror. Lysander observed dispassionately as lesser vampires and other creatures bid for a night's entertainment, for blood and flesh and services he preferred not to contemplate. None of the offerings interested him. They were too willing or too broken, and neither suited his purpose. Then she appeared, and the air in the chamber seemed to shift. Unlike the others, she walked without chains, her posture straight despite the circumstances. Her dark hair fell in waves to her waist, contrasting with a simple white shift dress that spoke of captivity but could not diminish her dignity. Most striking were her eyes, amber-flecked green, defiant and alive, with an intelligence that assessed her surroundings with remarkable clarity. "Lot 17, announced the auctioneer with particular relish. "A rare specimen indeed. 23 years of age, untouched by our kind, literate in 3 languages, trained in household management, captured from the Northern Territories, healthy, strong-willed, perhaps too strong-willed, but nothing a knight under proper control cannot remedy." Lysander leaned forward slightly, the first movement he had made in hours. The woman's gaze swept the room, and for a moment their eyes locked. No fear reflected in her expression, only a cold, calculating assessment that intrigued him more than he cared to admit. "We shall start the bidding at 500 gold pieces," the auctioneer continued. Bids flew rapidly, the price climbing as vampires and wealthy demons competed. Lysander remained silent, watching the woman's face. She stood unmoving, yet he sensed her mind working, cataloguing faces, perhaps memorizing those who bid most enthusiastically for her captivity. When the bidding reached 2,000, an exorbitant sum for a single knight's servant, Lysander finally raised a single finger. 10,000, he stated, his voice quiet, yet carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room. The auctioneer nearly stumbled in surprise. 10,000 from His Majesty, the King of the Northern Territories. No one dared counter his offer. The woman on stage turned to stare directly at him, her expression unreadable, save for the slightest narrowing of her eyes. "Sold," declared the auctioneer with undisguised glee. "Lot 17 to His Majesty." As attendants moved to escort her from the stage, Lysander rose. "I shall take possession immediately." "Of course, sire. The paperwork will be handled by my steward tomorrow," Lysander interrupted. "I have no time for formalities tonight." The woman was brought before him, and still she did not cower. Up close, he noted details missed from afar, a small scar above her right eyebrow, the calluses on her hands speaking of labor rather than leisure, and beneath the market's foul odors, her natural scent, clean, with notes of rosemary and something uniquely her own. "Your name," he demanded as they exited the auction chamber, his personal guards falling into step around them. "Ilara," she answered, her voice lower than expected, melodic despite its clipped tone, "though I doubt you care beyond having something to call me when you issue commands." Several guards tensed at her impertinence, but Lysander merely raised an eyebrow. Bold words for someone purchased like cattle. "Does my boldness diminish my value? Perhaps you should have bid less." A hint of amusement flickered across his features before vanishing beneath his customary impassivity. "Perhaps I should have. Come." His carriage waited outside the market entrance, a massive black conveyance drawn by creatures that resembled horses only in the most basic sense. Their eyes glowed red, and steam escaped their nostrils with each snort. Ilara hesitated for the first time, eyeing the beasts with undisguised apprehension. "They won't harm you unless commanded," Lysander informed her, holding open the carriage door. "And I've no reason to issue such a command. Not yet, anyway." Ilara climbed inside, positioning herself on the edge of the plush seat, as far from him as the confined space allowed. As the carriage lurched into motion, she gazed out the small window at the passing landscape, cobblestone streets giving way to winding mountain roads as they ascended toward the castle visible on the distant peak. "You're not what I expected," she finally said, breaking the prolonged silence. "And what did you expect?" Her eyes returned to his face, studying his features with disconcerting intensity. "Someone more obviously monstrous." The stories describe Lysander, vampire king of the north, as a beast barely contained in human form, with blood eternally dripping from elongated fangs. Despite himself, Lysander chuckled. "Disappointed? Cautious," she corrected. "Visible monsters are easier to anticipate." The journey continued in silence after that exchange, the mountain road growing steeper as they approached the castle. Ancient and imposing, Blackthorn Castle had been Lysander's home for 3 centuries, its spires reaching toward perpetually stormy skies, its walls impenetrable to those uninvited. As the carriage passed through massive iron gates, Ilara pressed closer to the window, taking in the formidable structure with evident trepidation. "Welcome to Blackthorn," Lysander said as the carriage halted in the courtyard. "You're home for the night." "A night that may well be my last," she murmured, though not quietly enough to escape his preternatural hearing. "That depends entirely on you." Inside, servants, some human, others decidedly not, bowed as Lysander strode through vaulted corridors, Ilara following a step behind. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung on stone walls, while enchanted candelabras cast dancing light across marble floors. The air within was surprisingly warm, contrasting with the perpetual chill of the mountain. Lysander led her to an opulent chamber several floors above the main hall. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, illuminating a space furnished with obviously ancient yet impeccably maintained pieces. A canopied bed draped in midnight blue velvet, ornate armoires, and a silver-laden vanity. "You may refresh yourself." He indicated a door leading to an adjoining bathing chamber. "Clean attire has been provided. I shall return in 1 hour." Ilara remained rooted in place. "To do what, exactly?" Lysander paused at the threshold. "To complete the rite of the blood moon. I require a willing servant for 1 night. One who will pour my wine, attend my needs, and at midnight offer their blood freely for the ceremonial tasting." And if I refuse, then you will have failed to fulfill the terms of purchase, he replied evenly. The market has procedures for handling such breaches of contract. Her hands clenched at her sides. So my choices are to willingly let you feed on me, or be returned to that hellish place for punishment and resale. There is always choice, Ilara, even when the options are unpleasant. With that, he departed, the heavy door closing behind him with ominous finality. Alone, Ilara explored the chamber, testing windows sealed with magic, examining doors locked save for the bathing chamber, and searching for potential weapons, none readily available. Finally, she succumbed to the lure of cleanliness, shedding her market-issued garment and sinking into the enormous copper tub filled with steaming, rose-scented water. As she scrubbed away days of captivity, her mind raced through possibilities. The Vampire King had paid an absurd sum for one night of her service, far more than tradition required. Why? What made her different from the other humans on auction? And more importantly, could she use whatever it was to negotiate her freedom when the night ended? After bathing, she found the promised clothing. A midnight blue gown of finest silk, cut in a style centuries old yet somehow timeless. It fit as though made for her, highlighting her figure without being overtly provocative. Completing the ensemble were delicate silver slippers and a matching silver circlet meant to be worn across her forehead. Exactly 1 hour after his departure, Lysander returned. He had changed as well, now dressed in formal attire of black and silver, his long dark hair tied back with a silver cord. He observed her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "The garments suit you," he commented. "Is that a requirement of the ritual, that I be dressed like a doll for your amusement?" "The ritual requires respect from both participants," he replied, unperturbed by her hostility. "The attire is traditional, nothing more." He extended a hand. After a moment's hesitation, Ilara placed her fingers upon his palm, suppressing a shiver at the unnatural coolness of his skin. He led her from the chamber, down a spiraling staircase, and through a series of corridors until they reached an ancient wooden door inscribed with symbols she couldn't decipher. Beyond lay a circular room, its ceiling open to the night sky, where the blood moon hung massive and crimson. At the center stood a stone altar surrounded by silver candelabras, their flames burning an unsettling blue. Upon the altar rested a silver chalice, an ornate dagger, and a crystal decanter filled with dark liquid. "Wine," Lysander explained, noting her wary glance. "The ritual begins with service freely given, followed by blood freely offered. It ends with promises exchanged under moonlight." Ilara's pulse quickened. "What promises?" "That is for midnight to reveal." He gestured toward the decanter. "We begin when you are ready." Something in his tone, an almost imperceptible note of uncertainty, caught her attention. This ancient, powerful being seemed nervous. The realization emboldened her. Perhaps there was more to this ritual than he revealed, something that might give her leverage. "Before I begin," she said carefully, "I would know what happens after the night ends. What becomes of me?" Lysander considered her, moonlight casting harsh shadows across his aristocratic features. "Traditionally, the servant is returned to their previous circumstances. In your case, that would mean the market. And if I perform exceptionally well, is there no reward for superior service?" A hint of amusement curved his lips. "You seek to negotiate terms after the purchase? I seek to understand my position fully before consenting to draw my own blood," she countered. "The auctioneer mentioned I was untouched by your kind. That holds significance, doesn't it? Enough significance for you to pay 10,000 gold pieces. Why?" The amusement vanished from his expression. "You ask dangerous questions. I face a dangerous night. Knowledge seems a small consolation." For a long moment silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of wind through the open ceiling. Then Lysander moved to the altar, trailing his fingers across the ancient stone. "The blood moon ritual is as old as my kind," he finally said. In the beginning it was a sacred exchange, blood freely given, protection freely offered. Over centuries it corrupted into what you witnessed tonight, the buying and selling of unwilling humans. But the magic recognizes only willing participation. Ilara stepped closer, intrigued despite her fear. What happens if the participant is unwilling? His eyes, when they met hers, held unexpected weariness. The ritual fails. And when the ritual fails 5 centuries in succession, as it has under my reign, the consequences become severe. Understanding dawned slowly. You need me to be willing. Truly willing. Yes, he admitted. And there lies our impasse. For how can one purchased at auction ever be truly willing? Ilara's mind worked rapidly, analyzing this new information. What are these severe consequences you mentioned? My strength wanes, my authority diminishes. Already, the southern covens grow restless, sensing weakness. His voice hardened. If the ritual fails again tonight, war becomes inevitable. Thousands will die, vampire and human alike. And if it succeeds, what do I gain besides another day of life? Lysander turned to face her fully. Name your price. The abruptness of his offer startled her. My price? For your willing participation. Name it. Power shifted in that moment, subtly but undeniably. Ilara straightened, meeting his gaze directly. My freedom, and not just mine, every human currently held in the shadow market, all contracts nullified, all debts cancelled. A muscle twitched in Lysander's jaw. Impossible. The market operates beyond my jurisdiction. You are king, she pressed. Expand your jurisdiction. You demand revolution as your price? I demand justice, she corrected. Is that beyond the means of the mighty vampire king? Moonlight intensified as clouds parted overhead, bathing them both in crimson illumination. The blood moon had reached its zenith. Midnight approached. You play a dangerous game, Ilara, Lysander said softly. One does not make demands of a king. Yet here we stand, with a king in need of a willing servant. She gestured to the ritual implements. Time grows short, your majesty. Shall I pour your wine and freely offer my blood? Or shall we watch together as your authority crumbles under this blood moon? Their gazes locked in silent challenge, king and captive, predator and prey. Yet the traditional boundaries between them blurred with each passing moment. In his eyes, Ilara saw something unexpected, respect, mingled with a growing desperation. The clock began to toll midnight. As the final toll faded into silence, Lysander's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, but Ilara caught the subtle straightening of his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw. Power radiated from him like a physical force pressing against her skin. You speak of justice as though it were simple, he said, voice low and measured. Nothing in this world is simple, Ilara. Not justice, not freedom, and certainly not revolution. He moved to the altar with fluid grace, his fingers tracing the rim of the silver chalice. I cannot dismantle centuries of tradition in a single night, even as king. The market has existed since before my reign and is protected by ancient pacts even I must honor. Disappointment surged through Ilara, bitter and sharp. Then we have nothing more to discuss. I did not refuse your price, Lysander corrected. I merely stated its complexity. His eyes, when they met hers, held unexpected intensity. I propose a compromise. I cannot free every human in the market tonight, but I can purchase 100 of your choosing, and I can commit to legal reforms that will gradually restrict the market's operations within my territories. Ilara narrowed her eyes. Words are wind, your majesty. How do I know you'll honor such promises after obtaining what you need? Because, Lysander said with unsettling solemnity, the ritual itself will bind me to my word. Blood magic is unforgiving that way. The revelation sent a chill through her. Blood magic. the most ancient and dangerous form of power, where intention became reality and broken promises extracted terrible costs. If he spoke truth, such a binding could not be circumvented, not even by a king. 100 souls is a start, she conceded, but not enough. I want your formal declaration against human trafficking in the Northern Territories effective immediately. And I want representation, a human advisor with genuine authority in your court. Lysander's eyebrow arched. Ambitious demands from someone who was merchandise an hour ago. Yet here I stand, bargaining with the king himself. Elara took a deliberate step toward the altar. The moon waits for no one, your majesty. Do we have an agreement? For a moment, Lysander remained perfectly still, his ancient eyes assessing her with calculating precision. Then, with a decisive motion, he lifted the crystal decanter. We have an agreement. Pour the wine, and we shall begin. The weight of decision pressed against Elara's chest as she accepted the decanter. Its contents shimmered with unnatural vibrancy in the moonlight. Not merely wine, she realized, but something infused with magic that made the liquid swirl of its own accord. With steady hands, she filled the chalice, watching as the liquid caught the light like liquid rubies. The ritual has 3 parts, Lysander explained, his voice taking on a formal cadence. Service, sacrifice, and covenant. You pour the wine as symbolic service. I drink, acknowledging your worth. You offer blood willingly. I taste, but do not take in excess. We speak our covenant beneath the blood moon, binding our promises until the next blood moon rises. He reached for the chalice, his fingers brushing against hers in the exchange. Even that fleeting contact sent an electric current up her arm, not unpleasant but startling in its intensity. Elara stepped back, watching as he raised the vessel in a silent toast before bringing it to his lips. As he drank, the room's atmosphere thickened. The blue flames in the candelabras flared higher, casting eerie shadows across ancient stone. Wind whispered through the open ceiling, carrying the scent of petrichor and something more primal that made Elara's heart race. Magic was gathering, palpable and potent. Lysander lowered the chalice, his eyes now gleaming with an inner light that hadn't been present before. The service is acknowledged, he intoned. Now comes the sacrifice, freely given. He extended the ornate dagger toward her, hilt first. The blade gleamed wickedly in the moonlight, its edge impossibly sharp, its silver handle adorned with intricate etchings of what appeared to be ancient runes. Elara accepted it with far less confidence than she'd shown when negotiating. The weight of the blade felt significant in her palm, its metal unnaturally warm against her skin. This was the moment of truth, the point at which her willingness would be tested by magic far older than herself. A single cut, Lysander instructed, across the palm, deep enough to flow, but not to endanger. Elara positioned the blade against her left palm, its edge already seeming eager for blood. Drawing a steadying breath, she pulled it across her skin in one fluid motion. Pain flared, bright and immediate, followed by the warmth of blood welling from the wound. The sensation was oddly doubled, physical discomfort paralleled by a strange metaphysical tugging, as though the magic were testing her intent, probing the depths of her willingness. Lysander held the chalice beneath her hand. Speak the words as your blood falls. I offer freely what sustains life. I offer freely what sustains life, Elara repeated, watching crimson droplets fall into the remaining wine, creating spiraling patterns as they dispersed. The moment her blood touched the liquid, the room temperature plummeted. Frost crystallized along the stone floor in intricate patterns, spreading outward from where they stood. The blue flames turned silver, casting a ghostly luminescence that transformed Lysander's features into something both beautiful and terrifying, more otherworldly than human, more predator than man. The sacrifice is accepted, he declared, raising the chalice once more. When he drank this time, Elara felt it, a strange pulling sensation in her veins, as though invisible threads connected her body to the blood he consumed. not painful, but distinctly unsettling. His eyes closed briefly, a look almost like reverence passing across his features. "Your blood," he said softly when he lowered the chalice, "is exceptional." Before she could question this cryptic assessment, the magic in the room intensified. Moonlight streamed through the open ceiling with unnatural focus, creating a perfect circle of crimson illumination around them both. Within this boundary, sound dampened and air thickened until Ilara felt as though they existed in a separate reality from the rest of the world. "Now we speak the covenant," Lysander said, his voice resonating with power that hadn't been present before. "The promises that bind until the next blood moon." He extended his hand, palm up, revealing a cut that mirrored her own. "Place your wounded hand against mine." Ilara hesitated only briefly, before pressing her bleeding palm against his. The contact sent a jolt through her entire body, not pain, but a rush of sensation so intense it nearly buckled her knees. Lysander steadied her with his free hand, his touch surprisingly gentle against her elbow. "Speak your terms," he instructed. "Be precise in your wording. Blood magic honors the letter of agreements, not necessarily their spirit." Drawing from hidden reserves of courage, Ilara met his gaze directly. "I, Ilara of the Northern Territories, require these promises in exchange for my willing participation in the Blood Moon ritual. First, the immediate purchase and release of 100 humans of my choosing from the shadow market. Second, your royal declaration against human trafficking within your territories, to be enforced by your full authority. Third, the establishment of a human advisor position within your court, with genuine power to advocate for human interests." The magic swirled around them, seeming to taste her words, weighing their sincerity and intent. Lysander's hand remained steady against hers, their blood mingling in ways that transcended the physical. "I, Lysander Blackthorn, King of the Northern Vampire Territories, accept these terms and bind myself to their fulfillment. In return, I require your oath of confidentiality regarding the true nature of this ritual and its significance to vampire authority. I further require 7 days of your service as my human advisor to establish the position before you may appoint a successor should you wish to depart." Surprise flickered across Ilara's features. 7 days? That wasn't part of our agreement. "The position you demanded requires proper establishment," he countered smoothly. "Unless you prefer I appoint someone unfamiliar with our agreement, someone who lacks your negotiating skills." Clever, she thought, reluctantly impressed by his tactical adjustment. 7 days, provided I'm treated with dignity, given appropriate accommodations, and allowed freedom of movement within safe areas of the castle." "Agreed," Lysander nodded. "Do you accept my terms as stated?" "I accept," Ilara confirmed, feeling the magic constrict around their joined hands like an invisible binding. "Then, by blood and moon, let it be sealed," Lysander intoned. The magic surged, coalescing around their joined hands in a visible manifestation, threads of silver light weaving between their fingers, around their wrists, up their arms. Where it touched, Ilara's skin tingled with electric awareness. The silver threads pulsed once, twice, before sinking beneath their skin, leaving behind a faint, shimmering pattern like delicate frost across her forearm. As the light faded, Lysander released her hand. The cut on her palm had sealed itself, leaving behind a thin silver scar that caught the moonlight with an unnatural gleam. "The ritual is complete," he announced, satisfaction evident in his tone. "And successfully so, for the first time in 5 centuries. Ilara flexed her hand, marveling at the painless healing and strange residual warmth where the scar now resided. "What happens now?" "Now," Lysander said, his formal demeanor softening marginally, "we honor the more immediate aspects of our agreement. Tomorrow at first light we shall visit the Shadow Market to select your 100 freed humans." A wave of exhaustion suddenly crashed over Ilara, the magical exertion and emotional strain of the night catching up with her all at once. She swayed slightly on her feet, earning a concerned glance from Lysander. "The ritual draws significant energy from mortal participants," he explained, offering his arm for support. "You need rest." Too drained to argue, she allowed him to guide her from the ritual chamber through torchlit corridors that seemed to blur at the edges of her vision. They eventually reached her assigned chamber, where the fire still crackled welcomingly in the hearth. "A servant will attend you in the morning," Lysander said as he paused at the threshold. "Sleep well, Ilara. You have accomplished something remarkable tonight." "One question," she managed through her fatigue. "You said my blood was exceptional. What did that mean?" Something flickered in his eyes, caution, perhaps, or calculation. "That is a conversation for tomorrow, when you are rested. Some revelations require full alertness to process properly." Before she could press further, he withdrew, closing the door softly behind him. Alone, Ilara barely managed to remove the elaborate gown before collapsing onto the bed, surrendering to a sleep deeper than any she had known before. Her dreams were strange and vivid, fragments of memories that weren't her own, glimpses of battles fought centuries ago, flashes of faces both human and vampire locked in eternal struggle. Throughout them all ran a constant thread of crimson. Blood spilled, blood consumed, blood sworn in ancient pacts that transcended understanding. She woke with a gasp, just as dawnlight filtered through the chamber windows. For a disorienting moment, Ilara couldn't recall where she was. The opulent surroundings seemed fabricated from her dreams until memory rushed back with crystal clarity. The auction, the ritual, the blood pact with a vampire king. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of a young woman carrying a breakfast tray. Human, Ilara noted with relief, though the servant wore a silver collar that marked her as bound to vampire service. "His Majesty requests your presence in the eastern courtyard in 1 hour, my lady," the servant informed her as she arranged the meal on a small table near the window. "I've been instructed to help you dress appropriately for a return to the shadow market." The mention of the market sent a flutter of anticipation through Ilara's chest. Today, she would select 100 humans for freedom, the first tangible result of her bargain. "What should I know about the eastern courtyard?" she asked, as she sampled the surprisingly delicious breakfast of warm bread, honey, and fresh fruits. The servant hesitated. "It's where His Majesty conducts official business outdoors. The Royal Guard will be present." She lowered her voice slightly. "There's talk among the servants. None can recall the last time a human was given such privileges, or the king himself escorting anyone to the market." Interesting, Ilara thought. Lysander's actions were creating ripples even among his household staff. After eating, she allowed the servant to help her dress in attire far different from the previous night's ceremonial gown. Practical riding clothes of fine quality, comprised of fitted trousers, a tunic of deep green, and supple leather boots. The outfit offered both comfort and mobility while still conveying a certain status. "His Majesty had these prepared before your arrival," the servant explained, fastening a silver clasp at Ilara's shoulder. "Almost as if he expected you." The observation sent an uneasy shiver down Ilara's spine. Had she been selected specifically? Was her appearance at auction mere coincidence, or something more calculated? These questions accompanied her through the castle's labyrinthine corridors as she followed the servant's guidance toward the eastern courtyard. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating a fortress far less grim than it had appeared upon her nighttime arrival. Tapestries depicting historical scenes and hunts adorned stone walls, while vampire guards stationed at intervals regarded her with poorly concealed curiosity. The eastern courtyard proved to be a spacious area paved in ancient stones, surrounded by covered walkways supported by ornate columns. At its center stood Lysander, engaged in conversation with a vampire whose military bearing and scarred visage marked him as a warrior of significant experience. Both turned as she approached, the conversation halting abruptly. "Ilara?" Lysander greeted her with a formal inclination of his head. "May I present Commander Thorn, captain of my personal guard and one of my oldest allies." The scarred vampire studied her with undisguised skepticism. "This is the human who completed the ritual? She looks ordinary." "A reminder, Commander," Lysander replied with subtle sharpness, "that appearances rarely tell the complete story." Thorn offered a stiff bow in Ilara's direction. "No offense intended. We've simply had centuries of disappointment regarding the ritual, which makes success all the more valuable," Lysander concluded, before turning his attention fully to Ilara. "Did you rest well?" "Well enough," she answered cautiously. "Though my dreams were unusual," something like satisfaction flickered across his features. "A common effect of the ritual, the blood connection often manifests through shared dreamscapes." Before she could question this disturbing revelation further, he gestured toward a stable entrance where servants were leading out several of the same unnatural horses that had drawn his carriage the previous night. "We should depart for the market promptly," he continued. "Word of last night's events has already spread. There will be many eyes watching our movements today, including those who might prefer the ritual had failed again," Thorn added grimly. "I've doubled your escort, sire." Ilara glanced between them. "Are we in danger?" "There are always those who resist change," Lysander replied diplomatically, "particularly when that change threatens profitable enterprises such as the shadow market." As they approached the waiting mounts, Ilara noticed that while most were the red-eyed, steam-breathing creatures of the previous night, one horse appeared entirely normal, a chestnut mare with gentle eyes and no supernatural qualities. "For you," Lysander explained, following her gaze. "The nightmares, as we call them, respond poorly to human riders unless specifically trained. This mare is from my personal stable." The consideration surprised her. "You expected a human companion today." "I prepared for success," he corrected, "despite centuries of failure. Hope is a persistent affliction, even for the undead." The wry admission, so at odds with his regal bearing, caught Ilara off guard. Before she could formulate a response, he had mounted his own steed, the largest of the nightmares, a massive black beast whose red eyes seemed to evaluate Ilara with disturbing intelligence. With the help of a stable hand, she mounted the chestnut mare, appreciating the animal's calm demeanor amid its unnatural counterparts. Commander Thorn and 12 heavily armed guards formed a protective formation around them as they proceeded through the castle gates and down the mountain road toward the valley below. As they rode, Ilara observed Lysander with new perspective. In daylight, he appeared less otherworldly than he had beneath the blood moon, though still unnaturally handsome by human standards. His posture remained impeccable, his movements economical yet graceful. Most striking was how the guards and servants they passed reacted to him, not merely with fear or deference, but with what appeared to be genuine loyalty. "You have questions," he noted without looking in her direction. "That much is evident even without our blood connection." "Blood connection?" she repeated. "You mentioned shared dreamscapes earlier. What exactly did the ritual establish between us?" Lysander guided his nightmare around a sharp bend in the road before answering. "The blood moon ritual creates a temporary bond between participant and king. It allows me to draw strength from your willingness, revitalizing my connection to ancient magics that sustain vampire authority. And these shared dreams. Are you seeing into my mind?" The possibility disturbed her deeply. "Not precisely. The connection manifests differently with each ritual. Dreams are common, but they rarely reveal personal thoughts, more often symbolic representations or historical echoes. How long will this connection last?" "Until the next blood moon," he replied. "Approximately 30 days. Ilara processed this information with growing unease. "You neglected to mention this aspect of our arrangement before the ritual. Would it have changed your decision?" he countered, finally turning to meet her gaze. "The connection poses no danger to you and will dissipate naturally with time." Before she could argue further, the distinctive outline of the shadow market came into view in the valley below. A sprawling complex of tents and stone structures that seemed to writhe and shift at the edges of perception, as though the boundary between dimensions wavered there. Their approach did not go unnoticed. By the time their party reached the market entrance, a crowd had gathered. Vampires, demons, and other supernatural entities, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to undisguised hostility. The market master himself, a corpulent demon with multiple rings adorning each finger, hurried forward with a sycophantic smile that did nothing to mask his obvious anxiety. "Your Majesty, such an unexpected honor! Had we known of your return so soon after last night's auction, we would have prepared a proper welcome." "This is not a social call, Master Gren," Lysander replied coldly. "I come to execute the first part of a binding agreement. 100 humans of my companions' choosing are to be purchased and released immediately." The announcement sent visible shockwaves through the crowd. The market master's smile froze, his yellowish eyes darting between Lysander and Ilara. 100? He repeated faintly. "Your Majesty, such a transaction would represent a significant portion of our current inventory, perhaps a more modest selection." "The terms are not negotiable," Lysander interrupted. "Prepare the necessary documentation. My companion will make her selections now." Master Gren's face contorted briefly before settling into a mask of forced accommodation. "As your Majesty commands. Though I must inform you that prices have increased substantially since last night's auction. Market forces, you understand." Ilara tensed, anticipating complications, but Lysander merely produced a small object from within his cloak, a signet ring bearing the same serpent emblem that adorned his throat. "I invoke the right of royal requisition," he stated formally. "Fair market value as assessed by my treasury, not a coin more." The market master blanched, his multiple chins quivering with suppressed outrage. "That ancient law has not been exercised in 342 years, Lysander completed smoothly. "I was present the last time it was invoked, Master Gren. Would you like me to recite the legal precedent established then?" Defeated, the demon bowed deeply. "That won't be necessary, Your Majesty. I shall personally escort your companion to review our inventory." As Ilara dismounted, preparing to follow the market master into the labyrinthine complex, Lysander caught her wrist. His touch sent a jolt through the silver scar on her palm, a brief flash of warmth that registered as neither pleasant nor painful, simply connection. "Choose wisely," he murmured, voice pitched for her ears alone. "And be wary. Not everyone here honors their king's authority with enthusiasm." The warning lingered as she entered the market's shadowed interior, acutely aware of the countless eyes tracking her progress, and the barely concealed resentment simmering beneath the surface of forced compliance. She had won a significant victory, yet as the market master led her toward the first holding area where humans were kept, Ilara couldn't shake the sensation that she had stepped into a nest of vipers, temporarily subdued but poised to strike. The Shadow Market's human quarters resembled nothing so much as a labyrinth designed by a sadistic architect. Narrow corridors twisted between holding cells of various sizes, some containing single occupants in relative comfort, others packed with dozens of humans in squalid conditions. The stench of unwashed bodies, fear and despair hung thick in the air. Master Gren's commentary as they proceeded was a nauseating mixture of salesmanship and thinly veiled contempt. "We organize inventory by value and intended purpose," he explained, gesturing toward a row of cells containing young women. "These are primarily for bloodhouses, trained to serve without complaint. Perhaps not the best use of your king's generosity, as they lack marketable skills beyond their current occupation." Ilara's stomach clenched at his casual dehumanization. "I'll decide their value, Master Gren." The demon's smile tightened. "Of course, though I should mention that some inventory has been prepaid through binding contracts. Those, regrettably, cannot be included in your selection." She had anticipated this obstacle. Show me all humans currently held in the market. I'll select from those available. As they moved deeper into the complex, Ilara made mental notes of each section, methodically evaluating who most needed immediate freedom. Children were her priority, followed by the sick or injured, and those held in the worst conditions. She forced herself to be strategic rather than emotional. 100 was a significant number, but she couldn't save everyone. Not today. In a particularly grim section, she discovered 3 children huddled together in a cell, barely large enough for one adult. The eldest, a girl of perhaps 10, positioned herself protectively before the younger 2, her thin face set with defiance despite obvious fear. These 3, Ilara declared immediately. Master Gren's expression soured. Siblings. Captured during the border raids. Troublesome lot. The girl has attempted escape twice. All the more reason they should be among the first freed, Ilara countered, meeting the girl's wide-eyed gaze with what she hoped was reassurance. For nearly 3 hours, she continued her methodical assessment, ignoring the market master's increasingly transparent attempts to steer her toward less valuable inventory. By the time they had toured the entire human section, Ilara had selected 97 individuals: children, the elderly, the sick, and those whose spirits seemed most broken by captivity. That leaves 3 selections, she noted, consulting the ledger that recorded her choices. Master Gren's multiple chins quivered with barely suppressed frustration. Perhaps some of our premium stock? We have several highly educated scholars recently acquired from the Western Territories. A commotion from a nearby corridor interrupted his sales pitch. A woman's voice, raised in protest, followed by the distinctive sound of a slap and a guard's harsh command for silence. "What's happening there?" Ilara demanded, already moving toward the disturbance. "Nothing of consequence," the demon replied hastily, attempting to block her path. "Merely a disciplinary matter with a particularly stubborn piece of inventory." Ilara sidestepped him with surprising agility, following the sounds to their source. In a narrow side passage, 2 guards had restrained a woman whose wild, unkempt hair couldn't disguise the intelligence blazing in her eyes. Blood trickled from a split lip, but her posture remained unbowed. "You can't sell me to him," the woman was insisting. "He killed my entire family. You know what he'll do." Another guard raised his hand to strike her again, freezing when Ilara stepped into view. "Stop," she commanded with an authority that surprised even herself. "What's happening here?" The guards exchanged uncertain glances. "Private sale processing," one finally answered. "Not part of the general inventory." Master Gren appeared behind Ilara, his breathing labored from the exertion of catching up. "As I was explaining, some inventory has been reserved through binding contracts. This one," he gestured dismissively toward the woman, "is scheduled for delivery to Lord Vane this evening." The name sent a visible shudder through the captive woman. "He'll torture me for information, then kill me," she stated flatly. "Just as he did my parents and brother." Something in her direct gaze resonated with Ilara, the same defiance she had summoned when facing Lysander. The refusal to be diminished despite overwhelming odds. "I want her included in my selections," Ilara declared. Master Gren's face flushed an alarming purple. "Impossible. Lord Vane's contract was signed and sealed yesterday. The deposit has been paid. Breaking such a contract would have severe repercussions." "More severe than defying your king's direct commandment?" Lysander's voice cut through the tension like a blade of ice. All present stiffened as the vampire king materialized from the shadows of the corridor, his sudden appearance suggesting he'd been observing for some time. Commander Thorne flanked him, hand resting meaningfully on his sword hilt. "Your Majesty," Master Gren stammered, dropping into a hasty bow. "We were merely explaining market procedures regarding pre-existing contracts." "I heard quite clearly," Lysander interrupted, his gaze moving to the restrained woman. "Who is this that Lord Vane pays so handsomely to acquire?" The woman raised her chin defiantly. Mira Nightshade, daughter of Eldrick Nightshade, scholar of vampire histories. Her voice carried unexpected strength, despite her circumstances. My father documented Lord Vane's atrocities against human settlements. For this, my family was executed. I alone escaped with my father's final journals. And these journals? Lysander inquired. Hidden where Vane will never find them, she replied. Which is why he wants me alive. Temporarily. A complex series of emotions crossed Lysander's features before settling into cold calculation. Master Gren, produce Lord Vane's contract. The demon hesitated briefly before dispatching a guard, who returned moments later with a sealed document. Lysander examined it carefully, his expression darkening as he read. This contract, he finally stated, invokes right of private acquisition without royal oversight, a clause specifically forbidden since the Treaty of Three Moons. His eyes lifted to the market master's now ashen face. You've been permitting illegal contracts in my territory, Master Gren. The demon's mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. The contract is void, Lysander continued. This woman is now included in my companion selections. He turned to Elara. You have chosen 98. 2 remain. Thinking quickly, Elara indicated the guards who had been manhandling Mira. Those 2. Confusion flickered across multiple faces. The guards, Master Gren sputtered. They're not inventory, they're market employees. Who were about to beat a defenseless woman, Elara pointed out. I'm selecting them for my 100 to be freed. Lysander's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Creativity wasn't specified in our agreement, but I find I admire the approach. He addressed the bewildered guards directly. You have a choice. Accept termination of your employment and depart with the others being freed, or face charges of contract violation under market law. The guards, clearly recognizing the better option, grudgingly relinquished their weapons. 100 selections made, Lysander announced. Prepare the release documents immediately, Master Gren. The processing of 100 releases required hours of paperwork, during which Elara remained vigilant against any attempt to substitute or misplace her selected individuals. By late afternoon, the freed humans gathered in the market's central courtyard, expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to open weeping. Many seemed unable to comprehend their sudden change in fortune. Mira Nightshade approached Elara as they waited for the final documents. You intervened without knowing who I was, she observed. Why? You reminded me of myself, Elara admitted, defiant despite the odds. And yet you stand beside the Vampire King as though an ally. Mira's tone carried no accusation, merely cautious assessment. There are many stories about Lysander Blackthorn, few of them suggesting he concerns himself with human welfare. Elara considered her response carefully. I'm learning that stories seldom capture the full complexity of reality. She studied the other woman thoughtfully. These journals you mentioned, what exactly did they document? Mira glanced toward where Lysander stood, conferring with Commander Thorn, her voice lowering. Historical evidence of an ancient covenant between humans and vampires, one based on mutual protection rather than predation. My father believed the current system of exploitation corrupted something that was once sacred. The revelation sent an electric jolt through Elara, recalling Lysander's words about the ritual's original purpose. Before she could press further, the final documents were presented for royal seal. With a flourish of magic that sizzled against parchment, Lysander completed the mass emancipation. What happens to them now? Elara asked as they watched the freed humans receiving provisions for their journey. My guards will escort them to sanctuary settlements at the border, Lysander replied. From there they may choose their destination. Some may wish to return to families, others to start anew elsewhere. As the large group prepared to depart, the young girl Elara had first selected approached hesitantly, her younger siblings trailing behind. With solemn ceremony, she presented Ilara with a crudely fashioned bracelet woven from threads clearly pulled from her own tattered clothing. "For remembering us," the girl said simply, before rejoining the departing procession. Ilara slipped the humble token onto her wrist, its significance outweighing any royal jewel. As twilight descended and they prepared to return to the castle, she noticed Lysander watching her with an unreadable expression. "You've accomplished something significant today," he observed, as they mounted their respective steeds. "The first substantive challenge to the market's operations in centuries." "It's only the beginning," Ilara replied, her gaze drawn to where Master Gren observed their departure with poorly concealed malevolence. "We've made enemies today." "I've had enemies for 5 centuries," Lysander dismissed. "What's a few more?" The return journey commenced in deepening darkness. Their procession now expanded to include Mira Nightshade, who rode slightly apart, her expression vigilant as though expecting pursuit. Halfway up the mountain path, Commander Thorn signaled for a halt, his posture suddenly alert. "Something approaches from the south ridge," he reported, indicating a barely visible movement along the tree line. Lysander's expression hardened. "How many?" "At least 20. Moving too quickly to be human." A tense silence fell over the company as guards shifted into defensive formation. Ilara found herself positioned in the center of the group, Lysander to one side, Mira unexpectedly close on the other. "Lord Vane," Mira murmured, her face pale in the gathering moonlight. "He wouldn't accept a voided contract." "Nor would others who profit from the market's operations," Lysander agreed grimly. "Thorn, escort the women to the castle. I'll handle this interruption." "With respect, sire," the commander countered, "dividing our forces would be tactically unsound." Before the argument could continue, the attack came, not from the ridge where attention had focused, but from the shadows of the road behind them. The ambushers moved with supernatural speed, a blur of motion that materialized into vampires bearing the distinctive crimson insignia of southern territories. "Protect the king!" Thorn shouted as the royal guard engaged the attackers. Chaos erupted as nightmares reared and screamed, their red eyes blazing with battle fury. Ilara's mare panicked beneath her, nearly throwing her before Lysander's hand shot out, steadying the animal with a pulse of command. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice transformed by combat, deeper, laced with power that raised the hair on Ilara's arms. A southern vampire lunged toward them, fangs bared in feral challenge. Lysander moved with lethal precision, his sword, which Ilara hadn't even seen him draw, separating the attacker's head from his shoulders in a single fluid arc. Mira proved surprisingly capable in the chaos, producing a concealed dagger and dispatching a vampire who had slipped past the guards. Her technique suggested formal training, her movements economical and precise. The skirmish seemed to be turning in their favor when a second wave attacked from the ridge, larger, more coordinated, led by a vampire whose aristocratic bearing and cold smile triggered an instinctive recoil from Ilara. "Vane," Mira confirmed, her knuckles white around her dagger hilt. Lord Vane surveyed the battlefield with the detached interest of a man observing an entertaining sporting match. "King Lysander," he called, his cultured voice carrying easily through the commotion. "What an unexpected pleasure. I was merely recovering property stolen from me, but finding you here elevates the encounter significantly." Lysander positioned himself before Ilara, his posture deceptively relaxed despite the danger. "Your contract violated treaty law, Vane. You have no claim to anyone in my company." "Treaties," Vane dismissed with an elegant wave. "Such tedious constraints on progress. Speaking of progress, how fares the Blood Moon ritual? Another failure this year? Such a shame. The Southern Covens grow concerned about the stability of Northern leadership." Understanding dawned on Ilara with chilling clarity. This wasn't merely about Mira or the market. This was the challenge Lysander had feared, the consequence of ritual failure. "The ritual succeeded," she declared, stepping forward despite Lysander's restraining hand. "I participated willingly. The covenant is sealed." Vane's confident smile faltered momentarily before recovering. A creative claim. Yet I see no evidence of the blood bond that accompanies successful ritual. His gaze swept dismissively over her. Merely a human playing at politics she cannot comprehend. Without conscious thought, Ilara extended her hand, palm up, revealing the silver scar that caught moonlight with unnatural brilliance. Evidence enough? A ripple of murmurs spread through Vane's followers. The scar was apparently significant in ways Ilara hadn't fully understood. A cosmetic trick, Vane declared, though uncertainty had crept into his tone. The true blood bond manifests in shared power, in the connection that allows a mortal to channel vampire abilities through willing sacrifice. "Are you challenging your king's word?" Thorn demanded, advancing menacingly. Vane's expression calculated, measuring options. "I merely suggest proof more substantial than a pretty scar. After all, if the ritual truly succeeded, the human would share certain capabilities. Temporary access to vampire strength, reflexes, perhaps even healing, easily demonstrated or disproven." Lysander's posture shifted subtly, a tension entering his frame that communicated more than words. "Ilara is not obligated to perform for your entertainment, Vane. Then perhaps she'll perform for her survival," Vane countered. With blinding speed, he gestured to an archer positioned on the ridge. Several things happened simultaneously, the twang of a bowstring releasing, Lysander's shout of warning, Mira lunging forward with impossible speed, and a burning sensation that erupted in Ilara's chest, spreading outward from her palm scar like liquid fire through her veins. Time seemed to slow around her. The arrow, aimed directly at her heart, approached with dreamlike lethargy. Without conscious decision, her hand rose. Her fingers closed around the arrow shaft mere inches from her chest, stopping its deadly trajectory with strength that couldn't possibly be her own. Silence descended as Ilara stood frozen, the arrow clutched in her grasp, its tip hovering before her heart. The burning sensation pulsed through her body in waves, synchronized with her heartbeat, each pulse carrying foreign power that both exhilarated and terrified. "The blood bond," someone whispered from Vane's ranks. "It's real." Vane's confidence visibly crumbled, replaced by calculation of a different sort. "An impressive display," he conceded, backing toward his remaining forces. "It seems congratulations are in order, Your Majesty. The ritual's success changes certain considerations." "It changes everything," Lysander replied coldly. "Return to your territory, Vane. Inform the southern covens that the northern throne stands secure." As the southern vampires retreated into the night, the borrowed power ebbed from Ilara's system, leaving her trembling and disoriented. The arrow slipped from suddenly weakened fingers, clattering against stone as her knees buckled. Lysander caught her before she fell, his touch sending another jolt through the scar. Weaker now, but unmistakable. "You shouldn't have been able to do that," he murmured, his expression a complex mixture of concern and something darker, more troubled. "What happened?" she managed, her voice distant to her own ears. "A manifestation of the blood bond beyond what should be possible for a human," he replied, his gaze searching hers with disturbing intensity. "Even in successful rituals, such capabilities transfer only symbolically, not functionally." Mira approached cautiously, her expression grave. "Unless the human in question isn't entirely human." Lysander's grip tightened almost painfully on Ilara's arms. "Explain." "My father's research," Mira continued. "The original blood covenant could only be established between vampires and those with latent vampire heritage, descendants of the first houses who remained human through choice rather than inability to transform." "Impossible," Thorn interjected. "The bloodlines were tracked meticulously. None remained unturned after the Great Conversion." "Some escaped documentation," Mira insisted. "Living secretly among humans for generations, the vampire heritage diluted, but never eliminated. My father called them half-bloods, appearing human in every way except their unusual compatibility with vampire magic." Ilara's mind raced through implications, pieces fitting together with sickening clarity. Her exceptional blood, Lysander's specific selection of her at auction, the unusual intensity of the ritual's effects. "You knew," she accused, pulling away from his supporting grip. "That's why you paid 10,000 gold pieces. You knew what I was." Lysander's expression confirmed her suspicion, even as he reached toward her. "Ilara, was any of it real?" she demanded, backing away. "The negotiation, the agreement, was it all manipulation to secure a half-blood for your ritual?" Before he could answer, a distant sound drew everyone's attention. War horns, signaling from the direction of Blackthorn Castle. Commander Thorne stiffened, recognizing the pattern. "The castle is under attack," he reported grimly. "That's the royal alarm sequence." Lysander's expression hardened into the cold mask of kingship. Vane's attack was a diversion. Their main force targets the castle while we're delayed on the road. "We're still an hour from the gates," Thorne calculated. "Even at maximum speed. We won't make it in time through conventional means," Lysander interrupted, his gaze returning to Ilara with renewed intensity. "But there might be another way." He extended his hand toward her, palm up, his own ritual scar gleaming silver in the moonlight. "The blood bond works both ways, Ilara. If you can access vampire abilities through our connection, I should be able to channel the one advantage humans possess that vampires lack, your capacity to ignore magical barriers." Understanding dawned gradually. "The castle's protective wards. Vampires can't teleport through them, but humans can pass unimpeded," he confirmed. "With your willing assistance, I could potentially transport us directly into the castle, bypassing the siege entirely." "Willing assistance," she repeated bitterly. "Once again, my willingness is your currency." His expression softened fractionally. "I didn't know with certainty what you were, Ilara. I suspected, yes, your scent carried markers of the ancient bloodlines. But the ritual's success was never guaranteed. Your negotiation, your demands, those were entirely your own, and I honored them without compulsion." The distant sound of battle grew louder, punctuated by screams that carried on the night wind. Whatever her personal feelings, lives hung in the balance. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Relief flickered across his features. "Take my hand. Focus on the connection between us, the silver scar, the bond it represents. Your human essence can guide my power through the wards if you permit it." Hesitantly, she placed her palm against his, their matching scars aligning. The now familiar warmth blossomed at the contact, spreading up her arm. "Remember, the blood bond demands willing participation," Lysander cautioned, his fingers interlacing with hers. "Not mere compliance, but genuine consent. Focus on your desire to reach the castle, to protect those within." Ilara closed her eyes, concentrating on the strange connection pulsing between them. She could sense his power, ancient, immense, yet somehow constrained within rigid boundaries of control. Tentatively, she reached toward that reservoir, not with her hand, but with her consciousness. The world lurched sideways, reality distorting around them as the boundaries between physical space bent to magical will. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Lysander's voice, surprisingly gentle against her ear. "I should have told you everything from the beginning, and now we may both pay the price for my caution." Ilara awoke to chaos and firelight. The scent of smoke and blood filled her lungs as consciousness returned with jarring abruptness. She lay sprawled across cold marble floors. The great hall of Blackthorn Castle, she realized, now transformed into a battlefield. Their magical transportation had succeeded, delivering them directly into the heart of the siege. All around her, combat raged between Lysander's loyal guards and southern invaders who had somehow breached the castle's outer defenses. The teleportation had scattered their small group across the hall, Commander Thorn was already engaged with 3 attackers near the main staircase, while Mira had taken up a defensive position behind an overturned table, wielding a fallen guard sword with surprising proficiency. Lysander stood at the center of the hall, a whirlwind of lethal grace. His movements blurred with preternatural speed as he cut through enemies with ruthless precision. His face set in an expression of cold fury that transformed his aristocratic features into something ancient and terrible. This was not the calculating monarch of diplomatic negotiations, but the predator beneath the civilized veneer, the Vampire King in his most primal form. The teleportation had clearly depleted him, however. Even as he dispatched another attacker, Ilara noticed the subtle signs of strain, the fraction of delay in his reactions, the tightness around his eyes. The magical transport had cost him dearly. Forcing herself to her feet, Ilara searched for a weapon. Her hand closed around an ornate silver candlestick, its weight substantial enough to serve as an improvised bludgeon. As she raised it defensively, a sharp pain pulsed through the ritual scar on her palm. The silver. It burned against her skin, uncomfortable but not incapacitating. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Her half-blood heritage conveyed not only magical compatibility with vampires, but also their weaknesses, however diluted. A southern vampire noticed her then, his eyes widening in recognition. "The ritual bearer!" he shouted. "Take her alive!" 2 attackers immediately changed course toward her, their focus shifting from the general melee to this new priority target. Ilara retreated several steps, her grip tightening on the silver candlestick despite the discomfort. "Stay back," she warned, knowing the futility of threatening vampires with mere physical strength. The first attacker laughed, fangs gleaming in the firelight. "The king's pet human thinks she can fight." As he lunged forward, Ilara acted on desperate instinct. She focused on the silver scar, on the lingering connection to Lysander it represented, and pulled. Power surged through her veins like liquid lightning, scorching her nervous system with foreign strength. She sidestepped the vampire's charge with sudden, impossible speed, bringing the silver candlestick down against his shoulder with enhanced force. The contact produced a sizzling sound as silver met vampire flesh, drawing a howl of pain from her attacker. "Not entirely human, it seems," the second vampire observed, his approach now more cautious. Across the hall, Ilara caught Lysander's gaze. Their eyes locked for a fraction of a second, and in that moment she felt their connection intensify. A circuit completed, power flowing between them like water finding its level. She could sense his surprise, followed by understanding, and finally a grim determination as he realized what she had discovered. The blood bond worked both ways. She could draw on his strength, just as he had drawn on her human nature to bypass the castle's wards. But each time she tapped that power, she could feel it draining from him, leaving him more vulnerable in his own battle. "Ilara," Mira's voice cut through the chaos. "The library. We need to reach the Eastern Tower." Understanding flickered through her. Mira's father's research, the journals that documented the ancient covenant. If they contained information about half-bloods and the original purpose of the ritual, they might hold the key to ending this conflict. Using borrowed vampire speed, Ilara fought her way across the Great Hall, her movements becoming more fluid as she instinctively adapted to her temporary abilities. When she reached Mira's position, the other woman was already clearing a path toward a side corridor. "Lysander!" Ilara called out. "The Eastern Tower!" He acknowledged with a brief nod, signaling to Commander Thorn to provide them cover. As they broke away from the main battle, Ilara felt a sharp, tearing sensation inside her chest, the physical manifestation of distance stretching the blood bond to its limit. They raced through smoke-filled corridors, encountering pockets of fighting between loyal guards and invaders. The castle had clearly been infiltrated through multiple entry points, suggesting a coordinated attack planned long before tonight's opportunity arose. "The Southern Covens have been preparing this for months," Mira explained as they climbed a spiral staircase. waiting for the ritual to fail once more, providing justification for removing Lysander from power. But the ritual didn't fail, Ilara pointed out. Her breathing labored more from the strain of channeling vampire abilities than from physical exertion. Which is why they're desperate to capture you, Mira replied grimly, as living proof of success, or to eliminate that proof entirely. They reached the library level, finding the massive oak doors splintered and hanging from broken hinges. Inside, scrolls and ancient tomes lay scattered across the floor, many burning in small, isolated fires. Several bodies, both northern and southern vampires, indicated a fierce struggle had taken place for control of this knowledge. Mira moved with purpose toward a specific section of shelving, pulling books aside to reveal a hidden compartment. My father entrusted copies of his most important findings to Lysander's library centuries ago, though I doubt the king ever realized their significance. From within the concealed space, she withdrew a slim volume bound in midnight blue leather, its cover unmarked, save for a silver emblem that matched the ritual scar on Ilara's palm, the Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its own tail. The original covenant, Mira breathed, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened the ancient text. Written in the first language. The pages contained script unlike any Ilara had seen, fluid symbols that seemed to move slightly when viewed directly, forcing the eye to approach them obliquely. Despite never having encountered this writing before, she found she could comprehend certain passages, the meaning filtering into her mind as though remembered rather than learned. I can read parts of it, she realized with astonishment. The half-blood heritage, Mira confirmed. The first language speaks to blood memory. A thunderous crash from below indicated the battle had reached the tower's base. They had minutes at most before being discovered. There, Ilara pointed to a passage near the volume's center. The ritual of blood and moon. The text described what Lysander had only hinted at. An ancient pact between the first vampire houses and human families who chose to remain mortal. Not subjugation or predation, but symbiosis. The vampires provided protection and certain benefits of their immortal knowledge. The humans offered willing blood donation that, unlike forced feeding, contained properties vital to vampire governance magic. Over centuries, Ilara read aloud, the covenant corrupted. Willing participation became forced servitude. The half-blood families who served as bridges between worlds were hunted to near extinction, their bloodlines diluted through generations of hiding. Mira turned several pages forward. Here, the prophecy my father died protecting. When the covenant stands broken for 5 centuries complete, a half-blood descendant shall either renew the ancient bond through willing sacrifice or sever it forever through blood refused. Understanding dawned with terrible clarity. That's why tonight was so crucial. 5 centuries of failed rituals, with this blood moon as the final opportunity. And why Lysander sought you specifically, Mira added, though I suspect even he didn't understand the full implications. The floor beneath them shuddered as something massive impacted the tower's structure. Dust and stone fragments showered from the ceiling. We need to return to Lysander, Ilara decided, closing the book and handing it to Mira. This knowledge must survive. They descended the tower stairs to find the corridor now occupied by southern forces. At their center stood Lord Vane, his elegant attire somehow immaculate despite the battle raging throughout the castle. The half-blood and the scholar, he observed with cold satisfaction. How convenient to find both prizes together. He gestured casually, and his soldiers moved to surround them. Ilara reached for the blood bond, but found it weakened by distance and Lysander's continued combat elsewhere. She could access only fragments of vampire strength now, enough to enhance her reflexes slightly, but insufficient against multiple opponents. The ritual succeeded, Mira declared, clutching the ancient text to her chest. By your own laws, the challenge to Lysander's authority is invalid. Laws can be reinterpreted, Vane replied smoothly, particularly when the circumstances are unprecedented. his gaze fixed on Ilara with disturbing intensity. A half-blood performing the ritual changes everything. Some might view it as deception rather than success. You knew, Ilara realized. The Southern Covens have known about half-bloods all along. Vane's smile confirmed her suspicion. We've maintained our own records, our own prophecies. The 5 centuries' end was anticipated, as was your emergence. He extended a hand toward her. Join us willingly, and the bloodshed ends tonight. Refuse, and watch Lysander's kingdom fall. Before Ilara could respond, the air temperature plummeted. Frost crystallized along the stone walls with unnatural speed, spreading outward from a single point behind Vane's forces. Lysander materialized from shadows that hadn't existed moments before, his form seeming to coalesce from darkness itself. Blood, both his and his enemies', stained his clothing, but his posture remained regal, unbowed. You speak of bloodshed ending, he addressed Vane, his voice carrying preternatural resonance that vibrated in Ilara's bones. Yet you brought war to my doorstep. The southern vampires turned to face this new threat, uncertainty visible in their stances. Even Vane's confidence wavered slightly. The prophecy speaks of choice, Lysander continued, his gaze finding Ilara's across the corridor. A choice that belongs solely to the half-blood descendant. Not to you, Vane. Not even to me. In that moment, with the ancient text's knowledge fresh in her mind and the blood bond pulsing between them, Ilara understood the full weight of her position. This wasn't merely about one night's ritual or one vampire's rule. This was about reshaping the relationship between humans and vampires throughout the territories, returning to the original covenant or severing it permanently. The choice was already made, she declared, stepping forward. I participated willingly in the ritual. Under false pretenses, Vane countered, without knowledge of your heritage or the true stakes involved. Then I make the choice again, Ilara replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Now, with full understanding, she moved deliberately toward Lysander, conscious of every eye following her progress. When she reached him, she extended her hand palm up, revealing the silver scar that had changed everything. I choose to honor the original covenant, she announced. Not servitude, but alliance, not subjugation, but mutual respect. Lysander's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he placed his palm against hers, their scars aligning. The contact sent a surge of warmth through the bond, stronger than before, clearing the battle fog from her mind and steadying her resolve. The covenant renewed, he acknowledged formally. Power built between their joined hands, silver light spiraling outward in patterns that matched the first language inscribed in the ancient text. The light expanded, enveloping them both, before pulsing outward in a concussive wave that swept through the corridor, the castle, and beyond, a magical shock that knocked southern vampires to their knees and left Vane staring in undisguised shock. When the light faded, the silver scars on their palms had transformed, the Ouroboros now complete on both, an unbroken circle indicating permanent connection rather than temporary bond. The 5 centuries' end, Mira whispered in awe, the prophecy fulfilled. Vane slowly raised his hands in gesture of surrender, recognition dawning in his eyes. The ancient rite of covenant renewal, he acknowledged reluctantly. By our oldest laws, the challenge is withdrawn. As southern forces laid down their weapons throughout the castle, Ilara felt the implications settling over the gathering like a physical weight. The renewed covenant would require restructuring vampire-human relations throughout the territories, dismantling systems of exploitation built over centuries. It won't be easy, she murmured to Lysander as the immediate danger subsided. Centuries of corruption can't be undone overnight. No, he agreed, his fingers still entwined with hers. But it begins tonight, with one willing choice that honors the original intent. In the great hall, as dawn light began filtering through shattered windows, Representatives from both northern and southern territories gathered to witness the formal declaration. The ancient text lay open upon a ceremonial table, its first language script now legible to all vampires present, a side effect of the Covenant's renewal. The path forward requires both human and vampire cooperation, Lysander addressed the assembly, beginning with the immediate dissolution of all human trafficking operations, including the shadow market. Murmurs of protest from certain factions were quickly silenced by the united presence of both northern and southern leadership. The magical demonstration of covenant renewal had shifted the balance of power decisively. To facilitate this transition, he continued, I name Ilara of the Northern Territories as permanent human liaison to the vampire court, the first such appointment in 5 centuries. Ilara stepped forward, conscious of the weight of history upon this moment. And I accept, with the condition that Mira Nightshade be appointed scholar historian to document this new era honestly, without censorship. The formalities continued as dawn strengthened outside, vampires eventually withdrawing to protected chambers away from sunlight. Ilara found herself in a quiet antechamber with Lysander, the temporary chaos of diplomatic arrangements momentarily held at bay. You knew what I was from the beginning, she stated. Not a question, but a confirmation. I suspected, he admitted. Your scent carried markers of the ancient bloodlines, but the extent of your heritage, the prophecy's specific requirements, those I discovered only tonight, through your actions and Mira's research. Would you have told me eventually, if Vane hadn't forced the revelation? Lysander considered her question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Yes, he finally answered, though perhaps not soon enough. 5 centuries of caution becomes habit, even when trust would serve better. Ilara studied their joined hands, the matching Ouroboros symbols now permanent fixtures upon their palms. And this permanent bond, what does it mean for us? It means we are connected beyond the ritual's traditional 30 days, he explained. Your life, already unusually long by human standards due to your heritage, now extends further. My power, now partially rooted in your humanity, becomes more adaptable, less rigid. And personally, she pressed, beyond magical practicalities. For the first time since she'd known him, Lysander appeared momentarily uncertain. That depends entirely on what you wish it to mean, Ilara. The covenant requires alliance, not intimacy, though I would not find the latter unwelcome, given time. The admission, understated yet significant from one so guarded, brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. 5 centuries of solitude makes you cautious in matters of the heart as well, I see. When one has centuries to regret mistakes, one tends to proceed carefully, he acknowledged with the ghost of a smile. But perhaps that too is a habit worth reconsidering. Outside, the rising sun transformed Blackthorn's imposing silhouette from menacing to majestic, illuminating possibilities neither had imagined at the auction mere days ago. Whatever came next, the political complexities, the resistance from those invested in the old ways, the personal exploration of their unexpected bond, would unfold gradually, with the patience immortality afforded. We begin anew, Ilara said softly, her fingers tightening around his, not as master and servant, predator and prey, king and subject, but as equals in covenant. Equals, Lysander repeated, the ancient word carrying fresh significance in the dawn of this new era. A fitting foundation for whatever we choose to build. As sunlight crept across the floor toward their joined hands, neither moved to break the connection. Vampire and half-blood, shadow and light, past and future bound together by choice rather than compulsion, willing participants in a story, centuries in the making and only just beginning.